Now, when I think of rotary watches, I typically think of dress watches. I know they're a British brand, and yeah, they kind of have that whole British coolness to them. But I'll admit, I wasn't that familiar with the brand. At least in America, where I'm from, they're not really on a lot of people's radars. And I kind of always wondered, are they kind of like a fashion watch brand? Is that what they're all about? But after spending some time with the watch that they sent in, no, I don't think they are. Today, we're looking at a substantial, well-built, well-spec'd, pretty beefy dive watch. And that is the Rotary Henley Seamatic. Let's check it out. Hey guys, welcome back to Just the Watch. My name's Dave. I live in Japan and I love to collect affordable watches. And the watch that we're looking at today comes in at $350, features a Japanese automatic movement, a sapphire crystal, ceramic bezel, 300 meters of water resistance, and a really solid build quality. And to top all that off, it comes from a great British brand that has 125 years of history behind it, that being Rotary watches. And this is actually the second rotary watch that I've gotten my hands on. I actually purchased one myself a little while before this. I grabbed one of their thin quartz kind of rectangular dress watches. And again, that's more the kind of watches I had associated with Rotary. But recently, it seems like they've been trying to break into kind of the affordable tool watch segment of the market. And this Henley Seamatic has a lot to like about it. The only aspect about it that gives it a little bit of hesitation is the choice of movement that they went with, which we'll get to in a minute. Now, Rotary did send me this watch for free, which is why you saw the paid promotions flag at the beginning of this video. However, other than the watch itself, Rotary did not give me any compensation for this review, nor did they have any input into the content of this review. This is what I would classify as a mid-sized diver. It comes in at 42 millimeters in diameter, 22 millimeter lugs, 48 millimeter lug to lug, 14 millimeters thick. If you count the Cyclops that they have on it, it's actually about 15 millimeters to the highest part of the crystal. You get 300 meters of water resistance, a ceramic bezel insert, sapphire crystal, and an automatic Miyota 8215 movement. And as far as the Lume goes, this one scores an 8 on my J-score measuring system. Now, for $350 to get those specs from a brand like Rotary is pretty unusual. We're kind of getting used to seeing these specs from micro brands and when you go direct to China, but rarely are you going to find these specs on a new watch from an established brand like Rotary. And so I think that brand heritage does play a lot into the way that you're going to value this watch. If you don't care at all about brands or heritage, then this watch is going to have a lot of stiff competition. But I think no matter which way you look at it, this is a very fair price for the specifications and the build quality that you're getting. And it actually has a very appealing design, which we'll also get into. Now, Rotary is kind of an interesting brand. Again, they've got 125 years of heritage behind them. They originally started out as a Swiss brand. However, they got really popular in Great Britain and eventually relocated their headquarters there. And so they're now known primarily as a British brand. You can see their watches featured in a lot of British TV shows. And from what I've heard, they remain one of Great Britain's most popular watch brands. A lot of their watches draw heavy inspiration from vintage pieces from other luxury Swiss brands. This one that we're looking at in particular, I think, has a lot of Rolex styling cues, drawing heavily from the Submariner or the Sea Dweller. But I feel like what Rotary often does is that they'll start with a particular watch in mind, and then they kind of tweak it and change it and make it their own. And so while you might refer to some of their designs as homages, I think it would be an homage in the true sense. These are not blatant rip-offs or direct copies. They give you a little taste of luxury watch design with their own little twist on it and at a much lower price. And to me, I think that's a pretty appealing formula to go for. Now let's dive into this Henley Seamatic in particular. Again, I think they started kind of with the Rolex Submariner as their starting point. You can see that particularly in the case and bracelet design. However, the dial and handset is completely different, and I think that gives this watch a lot of character and personality. And the other thing is that they have a lot of really interesting color options that, again, vary tremendously from what you're going to find typically out of Rolex. We're looking at the green version today, which has kind of a muted green, not quite an army green, maybe a little bit of like a forest green, with some nice orange and white accents that really pop against the dial. I really do like the handset that they've gone on this. These are skeletonized hands that almost give you the sense that the tips are sort of floating over the dial. And that's especially true in the dark because while the lume is pretty decent on these watches, the only part of the handsets that are lumed are the tips, which gives a really interesting lume profile in the dark, as all you'll see is a little glowing ball and triangle for the hour and minute hands in the dark. This watch also features a Cyclops date at 3 o'clock, so it has a date magnifier. and this magnifier functions very well. So if you ever have trouble reading the date on watches and you want something that will make the date larger and easier to read, this will definitely help. And visually, it's just kind of an interesting thing to add to the dial. Some people absolutely hate these. Lots of people like them. Again, Rolex seems to go with them all the time. For me, I kind of like it here. Overall, I was very impressed with the build quality of this watch. This feels like a very solid piece in all aspects. It has really great bezel action with very solid and defined clicks that has just about the right amount of resistance. It's very satisfying to use. You don't get any backplay, and everything's aligned very well. Same can be said for the crown action. It screws in and out very smoothly and allows very easy setting of the time and date. This watch also features a solid bracelet with a milled clasp, solid end links, and solid links all the way around. And they also went with female end links on here, which allows the bracelet to drop directly down from the lugs, so that 48 millimeters is the true lug to lug. And that's definitely a break from Rolex, and I think that's something that a lot of people will like to see, especially on a larger watch like this. It's very comfortable, wears very well on the wrist. On the back, you have a very solid case back commemorating Rotary's 125 years of history. Now, let's talk about the movement in this watch, because again, as I mentioned, I think this is probably going to be the biggest hesitation that people are going to have when considering this. This watch features the Miyota 8215 movement. This is one of Miyota's most basic entry-level movements. It's a non-hacking movement, which means that when you pull the crown out, the second hand will continue spinning, making it difficult to set the watch down to the second. It also features unidirectional winding, which produces a lot of rotor spin. So if you move your wrist rapidly or bang something, you might feel that on the wrist or hear it as the rotor begins to spin rapidly inside the watch. And finally, the sweep on the second hand does exhibit a little bit of a stutter, which is very common in these movements. That is particularly true, again, if the watch takes a shock, the second hand might actually stop for a few seconds. If you're not used to it, it can look very alarming, but that's actually part of the design of this movement. Even if the second hand does stutter or pause, it will catch back up. The watch continues to maintain accurate timing despite that. But again, if you're not used to it, it's a little bit jarring. On the positive side, this movement is a very robust movement. It's proven, it's been in use for a long time, and it keeps a relatively accurate time for an entry-level automatic movement. More often in this price range, you're going to find the Seiko NH35, which offers a similar level of robustness and accuracy without the rotor spin or the stuttering second hand. All right, let's jump over and talk about the lume on this watch. This watch features Swiss C3 Superluminova and BGW9, which means that it has primarily a green glow on the markers and hands, but the lume pip and the minute hand have a blue glow to them. Kind of a cool thing there. And the lume is good. This is fully functional lume. It's not going to absolutely blow you away, but you're definitely going to appreciate it. The one thing I will say about the lume kind of layout on here is that it takes some getting used to reading the time, because only the tips of the minute and hour hand are loomed. So in the dark on the dial, you'll just see a blue triangle and a green dot kind of in the middle, showing you where the minute and hour hands are. And they look very similar to the markers. So you kind of have to stop and stare at it a little bit to try and figure out what you're looking at. It's a neat look, but there is a hit to legibility. But overall, the lume lasts a long time. This one comes in with a J score of 8, meaning that's about 80% as bright as my Seiko Samurai after 1 hour. Pretty close to what Seiko puts out in their entry-level divers, which is always a good thing. So let's wrap this up by talking about the value that this watch offers. Again, from a pure specs and components standpoint, I think $350 is a pretty fair price for what they're giving you. On top of that, you've got an appealing take on the Submariner formula, with Rotary giving it their own spin, and that British heritage behind it. Seeing Britain's most famous watchmaker put out a watch reminiscent of the Rolex Submariner kind of made me feel a little bit like James Bond wearing it around, and did just kind of put a smile on my face. So if you can overlook the kind of basic Miyota movement that's in this watch, and if you're drawn to the design and the heritage that Rotary offers, I think this is a watch that's really going to appeal to you. But if you're not a fan of the Miyota 8215, then you're most likely going to want to steer clear of this one. Anyways, let me know what you guys think of this watch down below in the comments. Always love to hear from you guys. If you get a minute, head over to my site, check out the t-shirt and hoodie shop. You can get this turtle shirt there. But that's going to wrap it up for today. Thanks for watching. I'll see you later. Bye.